Well, welcome to Let's Talk. My name is Jay O'Brien, and I serve as a pastor at Scarlet City. And this is a chance for us to chat with someone about the intersection of faith and life. And today I'm joined by Amanda Hullinger. And Amanda is a professional clinical counselor here in Columbus and a close family friend. She's been a friend of my wife's for a number of years and has a special place in our family because she was present in a doula when Megan delivered our second boy, Jack. And man, seeing the whole birthing process, I find that absolutely amazing. And you in it, just your calmness and clarity in it was incredible. You made me tell Megan I would love to be a doula one day. Is there a thing for that? Or
there probably is, although it might be looked upon with some level of skepticism by the birth community.
Yeah. But there is something about that of just being with someone in a vulnerable moment and space. Certainly giving birth is that. And then also now as a counselor, you're walking with people through some of that. And so today I'd love to talk through just some of mental health and anxiety.
Sure. Great.
As it relates to our world.
Yeah. There's a lot of it right now. So it's a pertinent topic.
Yeah. And as we get in, was there anything you wanted to share or kind of setting up our conversation from your end?
Yes, thank you. So as Jay mentioned, I'm trained as a clinical mental health professional. I'm licensed by the state, so I am ethically mandated in this setting in my counseling office to diagnose and treat mental and emotional disorders, and I am required ethically or prevented ethically from imposing any of my personal views on my clients. At the same time, I'm ethically mandated to incorporate respectfully in a multiculturally sensitive and spiritually sensitive way the faith perspective or the lack of any faith perspective of individuals who come to see me. So I will be able to speak freely and openly as an individual in this talk with you. And I'll be much more candid than I ever could be in the counseling room. But I just wanted to kind of clarify, I'm not a biblical counselor, I'm not a lay minister, I'm not a pastor. So when I meet with folks here, I really allow them and must allow them to lead those spiritual conversations. That being said, most of the people who come to see me ask to integrate specifically their Christian worldview and their faith practices in their treatment plan and in the path toward healing that they embark upon with me. So I'm very comfortable operating as an integrationist. That's the place I stand, on the spectrum. But I had to kind of make that disclaimer at the beginning because I don't know who's going to listen to this. And I just needed to kind of make that clear from the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that I love that because it speaks to, I think, you as a counselor, that you really respect the other people's stories and that you bring that level of intentionality to your work. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And speaking of integration, I know we'll get to some of the kind of specifics in our situation today, but thinking of faith as for someone who might be a person of faith as a Christian, how can that shape how we engage in mental disorders and view it from a kind of higher level?
Sure. From a higher level, I think that it's important to keep in mind with mental health difficulties, as with any other difficulties we experience in life, we don't just experience them in one area of our life. We're whole people. We're integrated selves. If I were to be diagnosed with diabetes, which is actually quite likely based on my genetic history, that wouldn't just be something that I experience in my body. It's something that I would experience socially, emotionally, psychologically. It would probably have an impact on my spiritual life as well. Mental health difficulties are no different. So I really want to challenge folks to not think in boxes or in isolation. The things that we experience are experienced by our whole selves. And with mental health in particular, although I don't know if it stands out over and above other difficulties, when someone has a challenge with their mental health, often what folks see are changes in behavior. They might observe changes in the way someone feels or the way they express their feelings. it also significantly impacts the way people think and what they believe. So of course this has a tremendous impact on our spiritual life. For example, if I'm working with someone who has major depressive disorder, what's very commonly thought and believed would be excessively negative thoughts about self. I'm worthless. I'm not valuable. I can't do anything right. No one loves me. God doesn't love me. I'm worthless. Those are, subterranean problems that individuals who interact with you may not see or experience. Those are really the root system that create some of those excessively negative feelings and some of those excessive behaviors that are problematic in our relationships. So it really is often deeper, I think, than people really understand or realize. And we can be really irritated or confused by the behaviors and the feelings, but if we seek to understand what's really going on, we're going to help an individual get to the root system, which are the beliefs and the thoughts that are underpinning the problems. The integrated self was the first piece, but I think the relational piece is really important, and especially for you as a pastor, for those of us who are involved in churches and small groups, friendships with other believers who share our worldview. We are relational beings. Mm. God designed us to be in relationships. We come to know him through relationships. We heal through relationships. One of the greatest sources of grief for me in the whole field of mental health is seeing how it ravages marriages, it ravages parent-child relationships, it causes separations for people from those who may care about them but be confused or dismayed by their actions or their behaviors. The breakdown in relationship is often caused by the disorder or the illness, but then it also can exacerbate it. So hopefully we'll get to cover some more of that kind of territory as we talk. But the fact that we're relational beings is a very important piece of both our spiritual life and our mental health life. And the interplay between the two is really so critical when someone is sick and wants to take steps to get better.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot in there I would love to get to.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you mentioned is we're whole beings. And that actually speaks to a lot of kind of our approach to ministry at Scarlet City. Our success for us, if we boiled it down, our whole vision, it's helping people flourish, thinking that like holistically, personally, socially. And so we recently have done a sermon series called Jesus and Anxiety. So, it's a tricky, but very important issue to discuss. I find there's sometimes confusion.
Sure.
Could you, as a clinical counselor, we all struggle from anxiety.
Sure.
What's some of the differences in what's some of the difference between just normal acute anxiety and then more chronic or an anxiety disorder? How would someone who's listening wondering, hey, maybe I have this struggle, what would be ways you'd encourage them of discerning some of that, whether it's a disorder or just normal?
Okay. Well, that's a little more complicated today than it was 4 months ago. But I would say I'd want to make a distinction between a worry and an anxiety. Okay. So a worry, I would say, would fall more in line with concern about things that are not in our control. They tend to be passing. Sometimes we do or don't have a lot of control over the outcome, but it isn't something that's persistent. It isn't something that becomes problematic in our relationships. It isn't something that really controls us or can control us. Anxiety is when our thoughts go, it's always future oriented, right? And it always catapults us to the future, to the worst case scenario. Okay. A worry might be, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? But you can kind of dance along the surface of that and you can move on. Okay. Or you can distract yourself. And anxiety, an anxiety that needs to be addressed clinically is something that really takes hold and is really in the driver's seat of our thought patterns. I like to tell folks who come to see me, anxiety is never going to tell us to believe what's most likely going to happen. It wants to convince us that the worst possible scenario is going to happen. Now, usually those are possibilities. Like, I could get hit by a car on my way home from work today. That's a possibility, but it is far from being the probable scenario. So if anxiety is in the driver's seat, I'm going to be racked with anxiety driving home because I'm sure that the worst case scenario is what's actually going to happen to me. Folks who struggle, let's say, with anxiety when they're flying, we can say, okay, it's possible that something will happen to you when you're on an airplane, but I've had clients do research on this. There's a 1 in 65 million chance that something fatal is going to happen when you're on an airplane. I could fly in an airplane every day, multiple times a day for the rest of my life, and not get anywhere near a probability of that happening to me. But anxiety is not rational. It's not going to hold on to that rational thought and look at those statistics and those probabilities. It's going to latch on magnetically to the worst case scenario and be absolutely certain that that's what the outcome is going to be.
So this is kind of a little random, but so for like me, I struggle. This is weird and untrue. I have this crazy, people who know me, I have a crazy phobia of going over bridges.
Okay.
And it feels like when I share that with people, they're like, that's funny, sure. But when you're riding with me in the car, people get freaked out. I mean, because I go crazy. I like my heart rate increases, and there's a part of me that's afraid I'm just going to yank the wheel and fly off.
Right.
So for obviously that's one form, but do you want, say, like I came to your office, would you want me to grow to be able to confront that particular anxiety? Is that part of success? Or
Sure. The thing about your situation is it's a phobia. It's a specific phobia. It's not necessarily comprehensive, right? You're not afraid of all danger or all mortal danger at all times, right? It's specific, and you can probably avoid it most of the time. Most of us have phobias like that, but there are things that we can avoid. Some people are phobic about snakes. Some people are phobic about spiders. You're phobic about going over bridges or maybe tunnels, fall in that category too. Most of us can adapt our lives to accommodate. It's not truly problematic. It doesn't prohibit you from living the life that you need to live. It crops up once in a while, right? So it's really up to you if that's something that's problematic enough for you that you want to address it. It's something that could be simply addressed in therapy. But if you can live with it and it doesn't really bother you much of the time, it doesn't have to be addressed. Okay. For folks with really chronic and persistent anxiety, it's going to tend to crop up in more than one place, or it's something that simply can't be avoided. Flu and germs, that's a big one right now, right? There are a lot of people who have illness anxiety, and that is just, those poor individuals are really struggling right now. I mean, we're all concerned about the spread and the contagion, but those individuals in particular, their phobia and their anxiety is just being fed over and over and over again by almost every news story, right? Almost every conversation. So it really depends on whether or not it is prohibiting you from living the life you want to live, and how much of your, how much it impedes you from functioning.
So what would be some just practical advice you'd give someone who's struggling with some of that anxiety related to germs? So what would, Megan has some of that. I don't know.
We've talked about that a little bit.
You have? Okay. My wife, Megan, she, I think this pits for her two of her fears. And she would say this. I think she's okay with me talking about this. I mean, she definitely has some fear of germs, and she says she will watch when people touch things. Yeah. She sees that handle and might avoid it.
Yeah.
But then also she loves people, and having some isolation is really hard. So this situation puts a, what would you say to someone who maybe has some of that germ phobia or even social isolation? How would someone who's struggling with that? What would be some practical advice?
I think the best I can do from where I'm sitting is to share the same advice that I would share for all of us who are struggling with our emotional well-being right now. There really would need to be some pretty specific interventions for someone with that specific issue. And I'm not diagnosing your wife, and you're not diagnosing your wife from here, but the kinds of things that we all need to be doing are we need to be engaging in healthy, active lifestyles, right? We need to start with a routine. We have to live on a schedule, right? Exercise, the psychological freedom that we do have over our schedule for the most part. I know that it's not true of everybody, but we need to get ourselves on a schedule. We need to focus on good sleep. Research indicates, I share this with a lot of my clients who are struggling with anxiety and depression, good quality sleep and a good sleep diet can reduce our symptoms, whether it's depressive symptoms or anxious symptoms, by up to 50%. That's up to, okay, that's not going to be everyone, but we've got to get good sleep. So whether that means we're adding better sleep practices, whether we're adding some herbal teas, whether we're getting something over the counter to help us, or even seeing our doctor so we can be sure that we get good quality sleep. That's one of the easiest, not always easy, but it's one of the clearest first steps that we need to take. We need to, again, go outside, be outside every single day. We need to practice gratitude for the things that we do have. Many things have been taken from us temporarily. It feels like an eternity, but it really is temporary. But we need to practice gratitude, even if all we can say is I have a job and I have a good roommate. Okay, you have a job and you have a good roommate. Most of us can say a lot more than that, right? Most of us can say we have family who loves us. We have a church community. We're distant from them, but we still know them and we love them, and we can still connect through technology or safe social distancing. Practice gratitude and shift the focus. Some of the battle, as we fight mental health problems, some of the battle is in the mind and taking thoughts captive. It is easier said than done, but it's good for all of us to practice these practices. Focus on what you do have control over, okay? I was talking to my kids about this the other day. We're kind of bemoaning some of the things that we can't do that we wish we could do, and some of the choices that were made for us that are uncomfortable for us. And we just talked about, okay, what do we have control over? Okay, when we wake up in the morning, we still have the freedom to choose which clothes we put on. Let's focus on that. We still have the freedom to choose which breakfast cereal we have, or whether we have, toast or eggs or cereal. I can choose whether to have sugar in my coffee or not. I can drink it black and plain. I can choose which mug to use. There's so many freedoms that we do have that we just haven't paid attention to because they're seemingly small, but they increase in importance when others are taken from us. So you'll find, like, when you read about folks who survived in concentration camps and prisoners of war and things like that, almost all freedoms were taken from them. Those who survived and thrived afterward were able to focus and isolate on the choices they did have. And for some of them, it's only, I choose to live, right? And I choose to continue to love. We're far from there, folks. Celebrate what you can choose. Celebrate the freedoms that you do have. And lastly, we really do need to see people. We are relational creatures. And I'm not asking anyone to break the rules or encouraging that you break the rules, but following the rules, find ways to be face-to-face with human beings. Zoom and teleconferencing and the teletherapy that I do with folks right now, it's beneficial. I'm sure glad we have it, but it isn't optimal, right? The optimal human experience is face-to-face. We get such, it's just so much more beneficial to us, right? To sit face-to-face with someone, even if it's from 6 feet and even if it's with a mask, it's better than nothing. So do what you can to do those kinds of things. That does help. The other thing that I learned the other day that's super cool. And honestly, we carry anxiety in our bodies. It isn't just feelings, or it isn't just worry or anxiety. It isn't just thoughts. It's also very, very physiological. Okay. So that's why moving your body is important. Sleep is important. A good, healthy diet is important. And we talk about all those things in my office. Human contact is important. For those of us who have the option, ask for more hugs. If you're living with safe people who are allowed to hug you, right? Ask for more hugs. If you have a pet, snuggle your pet. And then this is super cool. So for those of us who don't have those options, and for some of us that is true, we live alone, or we're not going to hug our roommates. That's weird. You can hug yourself, right? And this is so bizarre, and I laughed when I learned it, but I practiced it, and it actually is helpful. Neurologically, when we hug ourselves, it is exactly the same experience as if we were being hugged by someone else. It's not the same experience emotionally or psychologically, but it is the same experience neurologically. So do that for yourself if that's your only option, right? Maybe in the morning when you wake up and you feel your heart racing because you are feeling anxious about the limitations in your day or some of the stressors in your day, give yourself a hug and practice some slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. Do the same thing at the end of the day when you're trying to wind down, and give yourself that little boost.
That's
So
really good.
those are just some practical things. I don't think any of those are truly unique or different than other things you've probably heard or seen. But that's the list that I'm trying to work with in my own family, in my own life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, man, there's so much good in that. And it speaks to what you were talking about earlier about just we're whole beings.
Yep.
That our body, we're not this brain on a stick walking around. Remember when I was seeing a counselor a number of years ago, he encouraged me. One of my homework assignments was like getting out and going on a run or a walk. He said, like, you have this energy.
Yep.
Gotta get out.
Get it out.
And
get it out.
And Megan and I, we noticed, like, man, when Jay runs, it's different. Like, there's the running Jay and relating with him, and the cooped up Jay, and so true.
Yeah, it is super true. Running is awesome for anxiety. Anything that involves bilateral stimulation or bilateral movement, it engages kind of both sides of the brain. So the kind of deep feeling anxiety center of the brain, and also the thinking part of the brain. So I won't go into all of that, but anxiety is, you'll find, I don't know, my husband is a big runner. A lot of anxious people are really committed runners. It's what really helps keep them regulated emotionally and otherwise. Also
That's good.
Yeah.
And another part of that is the relationships. And I think relationships are such a vital part for all of us. They can be a source of life, but they also can be a source of struggle and pain. And if we could go to some of that, I'd love to hear, what are some unhelpful practices? Maybe we start with the negative. I'm a positive person. I agree. I'm honest. Some like don't do's. If you have a friend, a spouse, a family member struggling with mental disorder, and you can be really clear. Things that are unhelpful. And then after, I'd love to get into what are some ways we can love people, support them.
Okay. So right out of the starting gate, I just want to start with the gospel, right? We need to believe the gospel for ourselves, and we need to believe the gospel for other people who are struggling. We are sent, these are the words of Mark McMinn, former professor of psychology at Wheaton. We are all broken, and we are all beloved. I don't know if you've heard those two terms, okay? So at the same time, we are all broken and beloved. Those things are consistently always true about all of us, right? For those of us who are in relationships with folks who are visibly, evidently, apparently really experiencing brokenness, it can be easy to forget that we are too. It might be different, it might look differently, but it's the same brokenness ultimately, right? Folks who come to see me are well aware that they are broken. I don't have to remind them of that, okay? Even if they are mired in a sin pattern, right, that is just crippling them, right? I usually don't have to remind them of that. They know that. What they are forgetting and what they aren't able to see, again, because of the excessive negative thinking and some of those core beliefs, I'm worthless, I'm valuable, this is hopeless, those kinds of things. They forget or they cannot see or believe that they are beloved children of the King of Kings. The King of Glory is their Father. Don't forget, right? That is our calling. That is our calling as people who love and care for others who are struggling, whether it looks like it's just a sin pattern or whether it really is, sourced by kind of mental illness, mental health, relational problems. There are all kinds of ways that we're broken, but we are all broken. It is easy to elevate ourselves because our problems don't look as bad, or because the ways that we cope might be more socially acceptable. But really trying as small group members, as family members, as church members, as pastors and counselors, trying to keep that in mind for everyone. The gospel is true, right? We are all broken and we are all beloved. I think practically speaking, in churches, in relationships, in families, we can operate often in the West as if we've got it all together. What that does for folks who obviously don't have it all together is it creates, it doesn't create a space where it's safe to say, hey, I need help. I'm messed up. I can't do this on my own. We know theologically that that's true of all of us. But functionally, sometimes it appears as if that is not true for everyone. So let's not create environments in our churches, in our families, in our schools that indicates that we've got it all together. Let's create spaces that are safe for people to say, I really need help. I think so often, and I bring this up often in my counseling room, Gospel of John, chapter 9, when Jesus approached the blind man who was born blind from birth, and he rubbed mud in his eyes, and he used just such a earthy saliva, which, oh my goodness, raise our hackles now, right? We don't want to go near anyone else's saliva. His saliva and mud cured this man. Jesus saw that he was blind. This man knew he was blind. And that's what really opened up the path for healing for him. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and everybody else who got all up in arms about breaking the rules about the Sabbath, they didn't see that they were blind, and they did not receive the healing that they truly needed. Let's not forget that, brothers and sisters. I know, believe me, I know how hard it can be to be in relationships with folks who are really sick. The behaviors can be so confusing. We can personally get hurt. We can just get frustrated, right? We run out of patience sometimes. And so we don't want to do that alone, right? We don't want to be the Lone Ranger helpers. We need to do it in teams. We need to take care of ourselves when we're helping others. So let's always keep that end goal in mind, right? Full healing and full restoration is going to occur when God chooses to enter in. It could be therapeutically, it could be medically, it could be part of because of love and consistent care that comes from a community. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. I could keep going forever and ever and ever, but those are some starters. What not to do.
So what on the flip side, what would be some things you'd encourage?
Yeah. I like to kind of use the guiding principle of the chesed, right? The Hebrew word, the loving kindness of God. Let's approach our loved ones with that kind of loving kindness. Not only God can enable that to operate in us, we don't have that in and of ourselves, but as individuals, as communities, let's have that be our guiding principle, okay? Folks who are struggling need consistent support. The road to healing and health is never a straight line. It's similar to what Gabe was saying, several weeks ago about, the journey through grief. You do not get better like this. That's never been my experience personally. It's never been my experience as a participant in someone else's healing here in my room. It looks like this, and some days there are big dips, some days there are great, great victories and mountaintops. But we need to offer that kind of loving kindness, consistent presence for folks who are confused by the process that they're going through. I think I wish I could wave a magic wand and give everybody in the church the ability to be empathetic. It is a superpower, it's something everyone can learn. Some people are just kind of naturally wired that way, but it really is something that we can all learn. I highly recommend a 4-minute video on YouTube by Brene Brown that outlines the difference between empathy and sympathy. Um, Empathy is being able to identify an emotion in another person who's speaking to you, to connect to an experience you have had in your life where you have felt that same emotion. You are not feeling their feelings, but you are experiencing that emotion simultaneous to them. And you are entering into that by saying, wow, that's hard. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing that. It's not trying to fix it. It's definitely not saying, I know exactly how you feel, because that is never true. And it is never comparing or minimizing or maximizing, and it certainly isn't silver lining. I think a lot of times in the church, we use scripture, which is authoritative and powerful, and it can transform lives. But we use it as a tool to kind of try to manipulate and control how people feel. That's a misuse of the tool, folks. That is a misuse of the tool. Yes, we can use scripture, but let's first seek to understand what people are feeling and understand why they're feeling that way. If I'm feeling like God doesn't exist anymore, I don't really believe in him anymore, it's probably related to a thought I've got going on. Let's get into the thoughts. Those are giving birth to my feelings of loneliness, spiritual apathy, that kind of thing. Let's look deeper before we say, kind of slap a pretty Bible verse on it, or chastise someone because they aren't feeling hopeful. Not only is that a symptom of depression, folks, even if you don't have depression, you can experience hopelessness. Life is hard. Life is hard, and we are allowed to feel what we feel. We have to take action, and we have to be responsible for the responses we have to our emotions, but we're allowed to have those experiences, those emotions. Scripture is full of doubts and fears and questions and concerns and anger at God, anger at others. It's a part of the uniqueness of the human experience. I like to call it the taste buds, right? God gave us taste buds. It's a gift. We could eat in a mechanical fashion and give ourselves all the nutrients that we need to survive. But instead, he's like, pow, have some taste buds. Why don't you enjoy this for a second? Or why don't you have the experience of actually hating Brussels sprouts or something, right? It adds so much more color and texture and richness to life, in the same way that taste buds do to our to food and eating, the experience of eating. I think emotions add so much depth and richness and texture to life. It's part of what makes us unique, okay? So let's be respectful of people's emotions, even if we don't like them, even if we don't understand them. And let's not try to use scripture as a tool to control how people are feeling. I guess to frame it positively, let's use scripture to encourage people to press on, to believe that God is who he says he is, to believe his promises. And friend, if you can't believe that right now, if you don't have that hope, then I'm going to hold on to it for you. I'm going to carry that lantern as I walk side by side with you until the Lord makes some kind of big change in your life and gives you the ability to see what is currently obscured for you.
That is so good. That's so rich. And yeah, I mean, those are the relationships we all need. People, I always feel that, like, people who are friends, and the difference between a confidant and an ally, that person who I can be honest with and they're not going to kick me out. Which in ministry, it's challenging. You have to be very discerning, because I love everybody. But, there is a part of that role and relationship that must be honored because it's important. But yeah, those people, it's like, you can be real and they're not going to give you go to the penalty box. We don't ask those questions.
Right.
So that's really good. Can I ask one more question as we, one of the things sometimes I think of, and as, there's a lot, we could talk about so much. Maybe we can do this again sometime. But one of the things is being able to differentiate, and thinking of like the anxiety. I don't know if you're overly familiar with kind of Bowenian theory of, your pastor, Joe,
Yeah.
a hack. He and I, we love talking about this.
Yeah.
We'll
Marie
hours.
Bowen.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
We, but the ability to not bring an anxious presence, especially when someone's struggling. Any advice on that of how to, if someone's struggling with anxiety, to be empathetic, but to not enmesh yourself with them, that you're able to have some differentiation?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that personally is an important part of my maturing in the faith. And I have to continue to exercise and practice that and learn new ways to do that because I am such a deeply empathetic person. And that can be a gift to others, but it can be very taxing and costly to me. And it does kind of predispose me if I'm not healthy and careful to that over involvement. I think as a clinician, I've as an individual, I've grown in that ability over the years, and as a clinician, I've absolutely had to address that, so that I can go home and I can experience joy with my family and don't carry the responsibility that isn't mine home with me. So to answer your question, I would say everything that you need to do under normal circumstances for self-care to live a healthy, boundaried life applies in this circumstance, right? We all know that when we are not healthy, well-boundaried selves, we're more prone to say yes to things that we don't need to say yes to, or to kind of stumble in whatever way we may, be prone to stumbling. So that's eating and sleeping and exercising and time with the Lord. More specifically, I think we need to develop healthy practices of releasing and relinquishing. At the beginning and the ending of each day, on my best days, not on every day, I walk into my counseling office and I just release my clients, whoever I'm going to see, I release them to the Lord and I acknowledge I am present and I am called by you to spend an hour with this individual. What you do with that hour is ultimately up to you. Use whatever gifts you've given to me. I may or may not see fruits. It isn't up to me, right? It is up to you. And at the end of the day, again, I have to sort of close the door and release back to God any entanglements, any emotional tethers that I have to situations, especially those suffering in the most obvious ways or kind of the most dramatic ways. What I offer is enough because God is all sufficient, not me, right? Just remembering who God is. I think understanding rightly my place in that person's story, and for you as a pastor, for a small group leader, for the deacons or the elders, just understanding what your role is and what it isn't is very helpful. Sometimes writing that out is actually helpful to me as well. Consider all the people who are in that individual's life. You are one of those individuals, and that's a privilege and a calling, but you're not the only one.
That's really good. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. This was, personally, really, really encouraging. And I'd love to potentially do it again down the road if you're open for it.
Sounds good. But, sure. If you find it helpful or if you get feedback that indicates that it's helpful, I'll be happy to. Thanks so much for including me and inviting me. It's really a privilege to share with you.
Awesome. Well, that's it for Let's Talk. Okay. Thanks, Amanda. And God bless you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.